Okay, have no fear, Hippie here is here. So our next video in our collection is it is Nametis #1 video. I never really watched them too much. I'm very unfamiliar with them, but we're gonna watch their video and see what all stuff they have to say. With the lovely Virgo Queen here.
Hello.
Every single killer in the game. Keep in mind at the time of recording this, the twins are the most recent killer added to the game. So if you are watching this in the future and you're looking for counters to newer killers in the game, be sure to check my channel as I'll most likely have those covered as well. The way we're going to do it, we're going to go from order of
I don't
so
remember.
the trapper and go all the way to the twins. Also, if you are
I've only played this
killer, check
for a
the
little
description. I
bit.
will put timestamps there.
Hey,
And without the way, let's just get straight into it. Okay, so
now when they
came out,
the most effective way to counter the trapper is to disarm every single trap that you see.
No.
If he keeps getting his traps disarmed, then he's denied of his power and he just becomes a basic M1 killer. Also, another thing you need to do is be really careful when running through tall grass, as you won't be able to see the traps that well unless you're really up close. And also be careful when running to loops that you've not been yet, as he could have set traps there.
Helpful
Pay attention to the floor and try and spot any traps before you run into them. Also, another thing to note, if he's not been into a chase and like 2 gens have been completed, then he's most likely set down a lot of traps at one side of the map. If he does go straight into a chase though with 5 gens left, he's definitely not had time to set any traps, maybe 1 or 2, but there definitely won't be many traps down, so keep that in mind. If you're at a small to medium sized loop and you see that he's putting a trap down, you can run away and make distance as he's setting that trap and get to a new tile. Just be careful though, as he could fake putting it down just to get you away from the loop, then get a free hit, so just be careful, but that's definitely another thing that you can do to counter the trapper. So next up is the Wraith. There's not that many tips I can really give you against the Wraith, as he is just a basic M1 killer with an invisibility cloak. Obviously you need to be alert and pay attention a lot, as he is a stealth killer and he could creep up to you. Try and keep a check on any line of sight that you have when repairing a generator so that he can't sneak up on you. Also, when he uncloaks, he gets a huge speed buff, so if he's cloaked and he's chasing out a small size pallet, he can easily uncloak and then get a free hit with the speed buff that he gets, so definitely be aware of that. One thing that you can do, if you're at a long to medium sized loop and you see that he's uncloaking, it will take him a couple of seconds, so you can use this time to move away to a different loop. Kind of similar to the trapper, when he's setting the trap, you can move to a different loop. Similar with the Wraith, when he's uncloaking, you will get a few seconds to go and move to a different tile. Just be aware that when he does uncloak, he gets a huge speed buff, so keep that in mind. Okay, so for the hillbilly, you want to use pallets and windows as much as possible to avoid getting hit with the chainsaw. If you're out in the open with no pallets and windows, you can try to use rocks or debris to avoid the chainsaw. It is a lot more unsafe than pallets and windows, but it still can be done. Forcing an M1 basic attack is always really good to do against the hillbilly, as it means that he can't insta-down you, and it's just turned the chase that you had with him into a basic M1 killer. The main counter to the hillbilly is to avoid the chainsaw at all costs. The first thing that you want to do against the nurse is to just avoid pallets. Pallets are completely useless against her. The only way that you can really use pallets is if you stun her mid-blink, which is incredibly difficult to do, or stun her directly after a blink, which again, it really isn't that useful as she can just blink straight through the pallet after being stunned. Instead, what you want to try and do is break line of sight as much as possible. Use any kind of buildings, walls, or debris to break the line of sight. Also, another thing to do is be really unpredictable with your movement. Don't always run in a straight line. Run forward, double back, fake the double back. Do whatever you can to try and be unpredictable. A really good nurse can be insanely difficult to counter, but if you're using these tips, I'm sure you'll be able to survive a lot longer in chase against the nurse. Okay, so next up is the Huntress. Again, you want to break the line of sight so that it makes it more difficult for her to throw a hatch at you. Any kind of small loops that are really tall, you can really abuse and keep running them over and over and over. Because she's so slow, it will take her so long to catch up to you, so you can just keep running through the loop, and it will take her several loops to catch up to you. Also, at all costs, avoid getting hit with a hatchet out in the open. If she hits you out in the open with a hatchet, she can easily just follow up with an M1 and get a really
now I have like ones I hate more than her, so...
Keep in mind that he's extremely slow in tier 1, so at the start of the game you'll be able to use this to your advantage in loops. Also, break line of sight as much as possible to avoid being stalked and to deny him of his power. Another thing that's very important against Myers is to split up and stay away from your teammates. If all of you and your teammates are together, he can easily gain a lot of stock from each of you, and when he goes into tier 3, he can slug and down everyone really fast. If you all split up and
all the
videos it's extremely hard for him to get any pressure from his power. He'll have to down one person, put them on the hook, then go all the way to a different side of the map, and then try and get another down. Also, if he has tier 3, definitely don't heal up. He can insta-down everyone, so healing would just be a waste of time. Wait until he goes back to tier 2 before healing. So next up is the Hag. If you see a trap on the ground and you know that she's far away from it, you can run into it to disarm it. Just keep in mind that if she is nearby, she will be able to teleport to them once you run into them. Also, another thing you can do is disarm them with a flashlight just by pointing the flashlight at them. Against the Hag, you definitely need to avoid the basement at all costs. If one of you gets put in the basement, she can put down a lot of traps and it can be game over right there. If you're at a loop and she's putting down a trap to cut you off, you can run away from the loop and gain distance towards a different tile. But again, just make sure she doesn't fake putting down the trap just to get you to leave the loop and get a free hit. Also, most of you will be aware of this, but for the newer players, if you crouch through the traps, it will prevent them from activating. It will mean that she can't teleport to them. Okay, so next up is the Doctor. There's not a whole lot of ways in which you can counter the Doctor, but there are a few things you can do. The first thing to keep in mind is that if you're inside a locker, you won't be detected when he uses his static blast. Another thing to do against the Doctor is be careful with your timing when vaulting a window or going through a pallet, as he can time his shocks to prevent you from being able to either slam down a pallet or go through a window. If you're at a small to medium sized loop and he's using his static blast to shock you each time you go through the pallet, the best thing to do is just keep running through it, and because he's slowing down each time he's using his shock, you'll be able to get a few extra loops in before either getting hit or having to drop the pallet. So next up is Leatherface. Similar to the Hillbilly, you want to try and use windows and pallets as much as possible to avoid getting hit with the chainsaw. Also try and force the M1 basic attack whenever you can so that he can't get a free insta-down. Also, another thing that you can do with Leatherface is if he's revving up his chainsaw and there's nowhere for you to go but there's a locker nearby, you can jump into the locker and wait in there until his charges run out on his chainsaw, and if you time it right, you can get out without getting downed. Although if you jump out too early, you will get down by the chainsaw, and if you jump out too late, he will be able to grab you. So it's definitely quite a high skill cap and something that's quite difficult to pull off, but if there's no other option and there is a locker nearby, it's definitely worth a try.
I like playing.
Next up is Freddy, and the best way to counter Freddy is to wake up and stay awake. If you're in a chase with Freddy whilst awake, he's just a basic M1 kill with no ability. He can't use his snares or pallets, whichever one he has, so definitely staying awake is the best counter to Freddy. Also, another really good counter to Freddy is to split up and have everyone on different generators. He can only teleport to one generator at a time, and after he teleports to one generator, his teleport goes on a cooldown. So the last thing you want to do is have 2 or 3 people on one generator and let him get all that pressure when he teleports to it. Definitely split up and have only one person on each generator. Next up is the Pig, so you need to always stay alert and try and have a good line of sight when working on a generator so that you don't get pulled off it. If she crouches to use her ambush at a small to medium sized loop, you can use this to gain distance towards another loop. Similar to the Hag and the Trapper when they're setting down the traps, you can use that to gain distance towards a different loop. Same thing here, if she crouches to use her ambush attack, you can use this to run away and gain distance towards a different tile. Again though, just be careful when doing this, as there will be times where she instantly stands back up just to try and mind game you away to leave the loop and get a free hit. When you have a trap on your head, it won't be active unless a generator has been completed after the trap has been put on your head. So if she puts a trap on you after all generators have been completed, it will be completely useless and you can just leave with the trap on your head. Also, you will always be able to leave through the hatch with the trap on your head. Even if the trap is active, you will still be able to go through the hatch. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind, knowing when and when the traps won't be activated. So next up we have the Clown. Dropping pallets early is one of the best things you can do against the Clown, as he can shut down loops really easily, especially small to medium sized loops. Bigger loops you might still be able to get 1 or 2 loops out of it, but yeah, dropping the pallets early is definitely one of the best things you can do against the Clown. Also, move to a new loop after getting hit, as it forces him to try and catch up with you and waste much more of his time. Trying to be unpredictable is another really good thing you can do against the Clown. If the way you're moving is too predictable, he can easily just throw a bottle in the way that you're going to move, so you'll have to run through the bottle and it'll slow you down and it'll make it so he can catch up to you before you reach a pallet or window. So definitely being more unpredictable is a really good way to counter the Clown. So next up we have the Spirit, who is easily one of the strongest killers in the game. There's not too many things you can do to counter the Spirit, but with that being said, there are a couple of things that will help you survive longer in a chase against her. The first thing you can do is try and be confusing with your scratch marks and be unpredictable with your movement. One example of this is running in a straight line and then doubling back to try and make her think that you carried on going in a straight line, and she will often go to the end of the scratch marks. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that when you're running through tall grass, she will be able to see the movement of the grass when she's phasing, so she'll know exactly where you are, so definitely be careful when running through tall grass. Next up is the Legion. So one thing you really want to avoid doing against the Legion is spending too much time healing. His power allows him to get everyone injured really fast, so it definitely works against him if you don't spend time healing and instead just repair generators. Also, split up and avoid staying too close to your teammates to prevent him from being able to injure multiple survivors at once with his power. And another good tip against the Legion is that if you stun him, it will take him out of his power. Next up is the Plague, and again, much like the Legion, if she has her power and you stun her with a pallet, it will take her out of her power. Also, avoid cleansing, especially early game. If you want to cleanse late game, you can do that, but make sure that you cleanse far away from the exit gates, as it will mean that she has to travel a long distance to go and collect her power. Using line of sight blockers can be one of the best counters for her whilst in a chase. It will make it quite difficult for her to puke on you and make you injured. Also, if you're healthy, don't repair a generator with a teammate that is infected. It will mean that you also become infected, and vice versa. If you're infected, don't jump on a generator with someone that is healthy, as it will just make them infected. So next up we have Ghostface, and the first thing you want to do against Ghostface is remove him out of his power whenever possible. Having him centered in the middle of the screen is the most effective way to take him out of his stealth ability. Also, another really good tip against Ghostface, if you know you were stalked earlier, you can always force an M1 and that will reset your stalk meter, and it will mean that he has to start from scratch if he wants to stalk you again. Next up is the Demogorgon, and the first and most effective way of countering the Demogorgon is to destroy all
I
of his
feel like
portals that you
his
see. The Demogorgon's
cocoons look a
portals give
little
him
different.
mobility around the map and allow him to teleport from one side of the map to the other, so if you destroy them every time you see them, it will deny him of this ability, and it's really a good way to counter the Demogorgon. Another thing that you can do against the Demogorgon is use walls and pallets to try and dodge his shred attack, and if you're looping him at a pallet and you see that he uses his shred predicting that you're about to drop the pallet, just keep running through the pallet and it will mean that you gain more distance in the loop. Next up is the Oni, and the first thing you want to do against the Oni is make sure you play really safe at the start. The longer he goes without getting anyone injured, the longer he has to wait to get blood, and the longer he's denied of his power. Also, splitting up from your teammates is a really good idea against the Oni, as it means he can't snowball as easily and he'll have to travel further across the map to try and find someone else. Try to go around walls at a loop and move in an unpredictable way to make it harder for him to hit you when he's in his power. Also, another good counter to the Oni is to heal up whenever injured if possible. This way it denies him of any blood towards his power. So next up we have the Death Slinger, and once again you want to use line of sight blockers as much as possible to make it difficult for him to shoot you. Also keep in mind that he can't hit you through dropped pallets, so dropping the pallet early usually ensures that he can't down you, unless it is a really unsafe pallet and really short enough for him to pull you around to the other side. Also keep in mind that if he misses a shot on you, he will need to reload, which will give you time to move to a safer area of the map. So next up on the list is Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head is another killer that doesn't really have too many counters. However, there are a couple of things that you can do which will help you out in a chase. The first thing that you should always make sure you do is whenever you drop a pallet, make sure you immediately move to either the right or the left. The reason for this is that when you drop the pallet, if it didn't stun him, he will usually go for a ranged attack straight away. Also, another thing that you can do, I'm sure most of you are aware of this, but for those that don't know, you can crouch to move through the trenches and it will prevent you from being tormented. But yeah, that's about it. There's not really a whole lot of things you can do to counter the Pyramid Head, but those are a couple of tips that may help you. So next up on the list is the Blight. The main counter to the Blight is using line of sight blockers as much as possible to make it harder for him to predict your movement. Also, another thing you can do is use debris and rocks and move behind them to prevent him from getting easy hits with his power, although he can curve a bit in his power, so just keep that in mind. If you're out in the open and he's coming towards you in his power, you can always try to curve in the opposite direction at the last second to avoid the hit. And for the last killer on the list, and the most recent one to be added to the game, the best way to counter the twins, or more specifically to counter Victor, is to keep vaulting safe windows or pallets. It can be really hard for him to pounce over and hit you. Also, if you're really far away from Charlotte and Victor's on you, you can jump in a locker, but because she's so far away, you'll be able to break out of the locker before she gets to you.
After the twins.
So guys, that's the end of the video. We've covered all the killers. Let me know in the comments down below if I've missed anything out. Hope you've enjoyed. Hope you found this video helpful. And as always, I will
hate them too.
What?
I hate the twins.
How can you hate the twins? They're nice. Okay, so that was Nametis' video. What did you think of that?
Probably 1 million.
Probably 1 million. You are correct on that. That's 1 million views. And then like overall, like just what was your thoughts?
Very informative, which is why I thought it had a lot of views.
Yeah, I would say
people want to know how to counter killers.
Yeah, I would say that's probably one of the most informative DVD videos I've seen in a while. Especially like quick tips on every single killer currently in the game. I'm like, oh my goodness. And he sped it up so you wouldn't waste your time too much on it, which is pretty
fast.
Pretty neat, but also you had to really take your time to digest it properly. Okay, on to the next one.